There is a wolf asleep on your sofa. It has been there for 6 hours. It is lying on its back with its legs in the air. At some point today, it will bark at a delivery van and lose. That animal is a gray wolf. Genetically, that is not a metaphor. Dogs and wolves are the same species, split into two opinions about people. Your wolf's great ambition is a tennis ball. It cannot open the door. It is currently standing in front of whining. It has, however, worked out which drawer the treats live in. Somewhere behind that animal is a thing that should never have happened. Roughly 15,000 years ago, and possibly a great deal earlier, a wild carnivore moved in with us. Not a rabbit, not a goat, a pack predator with a bite that cracks bone. Before we farmed anything, before anybody planted a single seed, before sheep, before cattle, before pottery, before the wheel. The first animal humans ever domesticated was the one most likely to eat them. Nobody has ever fully explained how it happened, but we do have receipts. Some of them are graves, and one of them is a puppy that was too sick to survive, and survived anyway. So, how did a wolf become the thing on your sofa? Start with the animal we started with, because it is not the one in the nature documentary. The wolves alive today are not the ancestors of dogs. They are cousins. Both lines come down from a wolf population that is extinct. Nobody has dug it up. We only see its shadow in the DNA of everything it left behind. That shadow lived in the late Ice Age, somewhere across northern Eurasia. Where exactly is still argued about, and honestly argued about. The evidence is thin. What we can describe is what that animal did for a living. A gray wolf lives in a family. 2 parents this year's pups, last year's pups. It can trot 40 kilometers in a night without particularly noticing. Its jaw closes with roughly twice the force of a large dog's. It hunts animals 10 times its own weight, and it usually fails. Most hunts end with nothing. A wolf's ordinary condition is hungry. Hold on to that word. Hungry is the entire mechanism of this story. Now put a human camp into the same landscape. Ice Age Europe 30,000 years ago. Cold, open, and extremely loud with animals. A few dozen people, hide shelters. A fire nobody is ever allowed to let go out. They are hunting the same animals the wolves are hunting, and they have just become annoyingly good at it. Spear throwers, coordinated drives, cut marks on absolutely everything. A successful hunt produces something no wolf on Earth had encountered before. Rubbish, a pile of bone, gristle hide scrap, and cracked marrow ends, just outside the camp. Free food in a fixed place that reappears every few days. An ecologist would call that a predictable resource. In wolf terms, it is a miracle. There is one problem with the miracle, and the problem is us. To eat from that pile, a wolf has to walk toward a firelit group of primates holding spears. Every instinct the animal owns says, do not. Wolves have what biologists call a flight distance, the range at which they leave. For a wild wolf, it is measured in hundreds of meters. It is not a decision. It is a setting, and it varies between individuals. Some wolves in every litter are slightly bolder than their siblings. Slightly, the difference between running at 400 meters and running at 3. Your dog's flight distance, for comparison, is negative. It moves toward the danger. In an ordinary landscape, that difference between siblings means nothing at all. Next to a rubbish pile guarded by humans, it means dinner. And this is the point where the story stops being about people being clever. Because the honest answer to how we tame the wolf is, probably, that we didn't. The version everybody knows is a caveman carrying a wolf cub home, warming it by the fire, naming it, teaching it to sit. It is a lovely story, and it may genuinely have happened sometimes. It is just very unlikely to be the beginning. People have raised wolf cubs. People still do it. It is well documented. Hand-reared from 10 days old, bottle-fed, slept beside, handled constantly. What you get at the end of that is a tame wolf. It is not a dog. It still cannot be left alone with the food. It still cannot be called off something once it is committed. And at sexual maturity, it begins testing whether it outranks you. Tameness is something you do to one animal. It dies with that animal. Domestication is something that happens to a population over generations. So the leading explanation runs the other way round entirely. The wolves came to us. The boldest ones ate best. The ones that could stand being near people raised more surviving pups. Those pups inherited the nerve and stood a little closer still. Nobody selected anything on purpose. The rubbish pile did the selecting. Researchers call it the commensal pathway. Commensal means roughly sharing a table. It is the leading model. It is not proven, and it may not have been the only route. Some researchers still think deliberate capture played a real part. The two are not exclusive. A population can be met halfway. What makes the self-taming story testable is that somebody actually ran it. Not with wolves, with foxes in Siberia starting in 1959. Dmitry Belyev's team bred silver foxes on one criterion, and one only. Not size, not coat, not obedience, how close the fox would let a hand come. Nothing else was selected for. Nothing else was even being measured at the start. Within a few dozen generations, the foxes were actively seeking human contact, and things nobody had selected for began arriving alongside the tameness. Floppy ears, curled tails, white patches on the forehead, shorter snouts, whining, barking, and face-licking, which are not really things foxes do. The animals were staying juvenile for longer, in body and in temperament. There is a real caveat here, and it belongs in the story rather than in a footnote. Those foxes came from Canadian fur farms, and they were already partly tame. Some researchers argue the experiment started much closer to the finish line than it reported. The effect is still there. The size of it is disputed. That is an ordinary state for science. The best current explanation for why tameness drags a whole face along with it is developmental. Early in an embryo, a band of cells called the neural crest packs up and migrates. It builds the adrenal glands, which run the fear response. It also builds ear cartilage, and the jaw and tooth size, and the pigment cells that color a coat. Select for a milder fear response, and you are quietly selecting for a slightly smaller crest. Everything else that band was going to build arrives slightly reduced. Floppy ear, white chest, short face. A dog's entire look as a side effect. That is a hypothesis, published in 2014, and it is still being argued over. So much for the mechanism. Here is what is actually in the ground. The oldest one everybody agrees on is a grave in Germany. Bonn-Oberkassel in the Rhine Valley, dug out by quarry workers in 1914. A man of about 40, a woman of about 25, and a dog, around 14,200 years old. The dog was a puppy, roughly 7 months when it died, and its teeth carry the marks of canine distemper. Distemper runs in waves. The second wave is the one that kills. A puppy in that state cannot hold its temperature and cannot keep food down. Left alone, it dies within days. This one lived for weeks through it, which means somebody kept it warm, kept water in it, and cleaned up after it. 14,000 years ago, someone nursed a sick puppy that would never hunt, and then buried it with their own dead. That is not livestock. That is not equipment. There is no economic reading of that grave. It is the oldest surviving evidence of the specific thing your dog does to you. There is an older gesture further east, and it is even harder to misread. Ein Malaha in northern Israel, about 12,000 years ago. An elderly person, buried curled on their side. Their left hand rests on the body of a puppy, laid beside their head. Not at the feet, not stacked in with the grave goods, under the hand. Older claims than these exist, and this is where the field gets loud. A skull from Goyet Cave in Belgium, dated to around 36,000 years ago. Another from Razboinicia Cave in the Altai, around 33,000. Both look to some specialists like early dogs, to others like wolves. Short-faced wolves exist. Crushed skulls distort. The measurements disagree with each other. Treat those as candidates, not as dogs. The field has genuinely not settled it. The genetics, meanwhile, has settled something else. In 2020, a study read the genomes of 11 ancient dogs. 11,000 years ago, before farming had spread anywhere, there were already at least 5 dog lineages. 5 distinct populations of dog, spread across the world at the end of the Ice Age. Lineages do not split overnight. Everything that produced them is older still. Estimates for the original split run from about 40,000 years ago down to 15. That is a very wide range, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. What the range does rule out is farming. The dog came first by a long way. There is also a hypothesis that this happened twice, once in the east, once in the west. Later work leans toward a single origin. The location is still open. Then there is the evidence the animal is carrying around on its face. In 2019, a team dissected the faces of dogs and of gray wolves. The dogs had a small muscle above the eye that the wolves, with one exception, did not. It lifts the inner eyebrow. It makes the eye look bigger and sadder and younger. It is the exact expression that stops a person walking past a shelter pen. The sample was small, and later work found traces of that muscle in some wolves too. The direction of it still holds. We bred a face that talks to us. Dogs also do a thing with their eyes that hand-raised wolves do not. They hold eye contact, and both sides get a rise in oxytocin out of it. The same feedback loop that runs between a parent and an infant. A dog will also follow a human pointing finger, first time untrained. Puppies manage it at 8 weeks old, before they have learned anything at all. Hand-raised wolves mostly cannot. Chimpanzees mostly cannot. Wolves, to be fair, are better than dogs at the actual puzzle. Give both a sealed box with meat in it. The wolf works at the box. The dog works at it for a few seconds, then turns around and looks at you. That is the trade. Somewhere back there, a dog gave up solving things alone. Which brings us to the count. Gray wolves left in the world today. Somewhere around 250,000. Dogs somewhere close to 1 billion. The 2 lines started in the same place, in the same century, in the same litters. One line stayed out beyond the firelight and kept every bit of its independence. The other one came in, took the scraps, and inherited the planet. So look at it again, on your sofa, upside down, snoring. It has a bowl with its name on it. It has a coat in a color somebody chose. It has a bed it does not use, next to yours, which it does. There is an entire aisle of a supermarket devoted to it. Inside it there is still a wolf's jaw, a wolf's nose, and a wolf's need for a family. What we removed was the distance. We did not invent the dog. We left food out and stood still for long enough, and a few animals in every generation decided the fire was worth the risk. Everything since, the fetching, the whining at doors, the welcome at the airport, is that one decision compounding. The ball, incidentally, is under the sofa. It has been the whole time. Your wolf knows this. Your wolf has decided that retrieving it is your job. That is what 15,000 years of trust buys you. It buys you a predator who is fairly sure you work for it.